Happy New Year, everybody. And here we are on the bench with a Gottlieb Star Race System 80 MPU. And Star Race is a wide body with a pretty interesting playfield layout. Now, this MPU is one of the early ones. It's got the dual 8K ROMs at 657/1 and /2. I'm probably going to leave that like it is rather than update it to a single ROM configuration, which is pretty simple. So the board had several problems. One was switch, what is that, 25, 6, 7, 8. The fourth one down with the gold tick on it. Even though the rocker was set to on, that switch was not making. So that didn't allow turning on the ball in play / credit score. The next problem was that it wasn't recognizing any of the coin door switches, and even though I'd used my logic probe to make sure that row 7 was returning to U4, it still wasn't recognizing those switches. So I swapped U4 and U5 because they were already socketed by some previous work, and it still didn't allow the MPU to recognize that switch. So the only thing left is U2 and U3, and they don't fail very often, and they don't fail in this way very often. This is the very first time I've ever seen that. But I took those out and I substituted one of my daughter boards with my combined System 80 U2 U3 ROM, and now the coin door switches are working. So the last thing to repair, and even though I repaired this switch to allow the ball in play credit display to operate, it still wasn't operating in test mode except for the digit 1. And the digit 1 on System 80 displays is actually segment H, and it's created differently from all other numerals that are put up on display. Normally, you get the segments come out of 174.48, and the digits are turned on individually via these 7404s. So when I had it into test, it wouldn't make any digits, but it would make the number 1. Number 1 comes out of U5, display control, Riot, gets inverted, and it goes directly out to the display. So every time it came around to make a 1, that would work, but nothing else would work. So that told me that the problem had to be in one of these two ICs. So I took the ICs off the board, tested them with my Chinese chip tester, and both of them worked fine. I also knew that the other displays, 1, 2, 3, 4, player 1, 2, 3, 4 were working fine, so it had to be something either with these chips or with a connection to the chip. So both chips tested fine, so that only left connections. And then I noticed that, pin 9 to Z22, which is the clock signal, was not being pulsed by the PIA. Now, pin 14 was pulsing, but pin 9 was not pulsing. And of course, that means there's a discontinuity between here and there. The way these 74175s work is this is a quad D flip-flop. So data will be put on pins 4, 5, 12, and 13. You pulse the clock signal, and then that data stays on the pins 3, 6, 11, and 14, which goes out to the display. So where did I find the break in the signal? Right there. You can see that line across that trace. So that must have gotten damaged when the socket was being replaced. There's some other damage here, but I can repair that. But this is the one that was not allowing the signal to get from U5 to pin 9 on the 74175 at Z22, which was not allowing any segment data to go out to the display. So let's repair that and then head over to the game. This board's in the Christmas spirit because it's the board that keeps on giving. I had to remove the 7448 because segments weren't being displayed correctly on the ball and play credit unit, and I think I know why. So let's get this cleaned up. So I cleaned up that socket installation, but the ball and play and credit display were still indicating the wrong digits. So I tested the 7448 and again in my Chinese chip tester, and it says it's just fine. But that is one of the things you need to be careful of. This chip tester can test a chip as bad, and it will be bad, but if it tests it as good, it's still not necessarily good. Same thing when you're doing diode tests or bridge rectifier tests. So we've got a new 7448 in the game, and I did a slow-mo of display tests that I'll roll in here. But let's test out the rest of the MPU while we're at it. So I'm using my homemade switch matrix tester device that I made long before Pennytech started making theirs. Now we're in test 16, which is lamp test, and it's going to pulse 3 coils 3 times or twice, and then it will start cycling the lamps. And of course I'm in my Spider-Man, so I posted a fella who'd done some touch-up on his Spider-Man. It looked really good. I wish Mirko would remake this playfield, or somebody would remake this playfield. It would be awesome. So the lamp function's working perfectly. And the next test is solenoid test. So you notice that solenoid test skipped 3, 4, and 6, I think. Those are coin counter solenoids, and they're never pulsed on these early System 80 games. Switch test, and again, this MPU was not recognizing the cabinet switches. I'm going to go across the diagonal and show that all of the switch matrix is being recognized. I don't want to do 77 because it is in the row with the cabinet switches, and it'll cause the MPU to do something funky. So here's 19 is the display test. I'm going to skip that. And 20 is the memory test, and it comes up 99, indicating that memory's okay. So I need to put together a U2, U3 board for this MPU, and it will be good to go. Thank you so much for sending it. This has been a fun one. And now at first, this is time lapse of a complete display test.